guys. Here is a deeper dive into the allegations of Daystar as told by the Roy's Report. The day their daughter disclosed the alleged abuse, Susie said she immediately called Joni, who urged Susie not to go to police but instead to bring the girl to her. After meeting one-on-one with Joni, the girl stopped talking about what had happened, Susie and Jonathan said. Susie said, "I don't know what happened there, but she was like a lockbox." Jonathan said, "She doesn't remember one thing. She doesn't even remember having that conversation. It's like it never happened." Texas law requires anyone suspecting a child has been abused to report it to authorities. Jonathan and Susie reported their suspicions to police, but said they kept it secret from their family. Because their daughter wouldn't talk about it, police closed the case. Later, it was reopened. Then, on August 3rd, 2021, when Jonathan caught Pete alone in a room with his naked daughter, the couple went to Marcus and Joni hoping they'd do something. But almost immediately, the elder Lambs declared Pete innocent, Jonathan and Susie said. Marcus and Joni justified Pete's presence in the girl's room by saying, "Pete loved her and simply wanted to hang out with her," Susie said. Susie said, "When I strongly objected, saying that didn't explain why Pete was in the room with her naked daughter, Joni blamed the couple's daughter, saying she was the one who took her clothes off. At this, Susie said she began screaming at her mother-in-law, but Joni was adamant and reiterated her claims several times over the next 24 hours. At one point, Marcus and Joni gathered Jonathan and Susie with Pete and his wife in Marcus and Joni's bedroom and insisted that they repent to each other and pray, Susie said. Then Rebecca and JW, who had been barred from the room, barged in, insisting they be included, Susie added. Rebecca was angry, Susie said, and began praying in tongues like in a war mode. Susie said she was in shock by what was happening. Later, in the day, Susie said Rebecca confronted her dad, saying, "Why are you doing this to us? Why aren't you doing what's right?" Susie said. Marcus responded, "Because of Pete's wife and their child." That night, when Susie insisted their kids sleep in the room next to them instead of upstairs, Joni confronted her, saying, "Look at what you're doing to this family. What about Pete's wife and Pete? What about their feelings?" The next day, while Jonathan, Susie, Rebecca, JW, Marcus, and Joni were gathered in the kitchen, Joni claimed that God had told her while she was praying that Pete was innocent, Jonathan and Susie said. At this, Marcus reportedly clapped his hands in joy, and the rest stood dumbfounded. The Roy's Report reached out to Joni Lamb with detailed questions about the allegations Susie and Jonathan leveled against her and Marcus, as well as other issues. Daystar responded with a written statement, which said, in part, there is clearly a misunderstanding of what transpired, and the facts are quite different than what appears to have been reported to you. We simply do not support Jonathan and Susie's false allegations and are saddened by the continued relational incongruity between Jonathan and Susie and the rest of their family. Similarly, the Roy's Report reached out to Pete, whose lawyer, Mark G. Daniels, sent a letter to the Roy's Report. It stated in part my client unequivocally denies the statements made by Jonathan and Susie Lamb, alleging that he engaged in some form of improper contact with any child. Anyone who knows Pete knows that these statements are false, insulting, and demeaning. The Roys report also contacted Rebecca and JW to discuss the details in this article. The couple chatted briefly with TRR and said they would consider going on the record. After 3 days and no contact from the couple, TRR reached out via email to them with detailed questions, but they did not reply. Marcus claims Pete is cleared, but was he? The following week, Marcus and Joni sent Jonathan and Susie to North Carolina with their daughter to meet with author and speaker Denise Boggs, founder of a healing ministry called Living Waters. Susie said the impetus for sending them away was a verse she posted on Instagram about it being better to be drowned in the sea than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. Susie said the post caused Joni to believe she was volatile. Boggs was a trusted friend of the Lamb family, whom Marcus and Joni had previously brought in to try and help resolve personal conflicts between Lamb family members. After learning about the situation, Boggs, who's not a licensed counselor, brought in Debbie Leonhardt, a licensed forensic counselor, to interview Jonathan and Susie and their daughter and assess whether the girl had likely been assaulted. Boggs declined to comment on the record for this story, but Leonhardt spoke with TRR and said the couple's daughter had already shut down by the time she saw her and wouldn't talk. Leonhardt told TRR that this response is very common among child sex abuse victims, especially if they've been sworn to secrecy. Based on what Jonathan and Susie told her, Leonhardt said she told the couple the alleged abuse needed to be explored further and urged them to get their daughter to a counselor in their home state of Texas. Susie said their daughter was so traumatized and scared by what she'd experienced at the beach house, she wouldn't leave her side. So the couple decided to wait a while before attempting counseling. On August 10th, 2021, the same day Jonathan and Susie met with Leonhardt, Marcus emailed his 3 children and their spouses, as well as Daystar CFO Arnold Torres. The email outlined a succession plan should Marcus die. Jonathan said that prior to this time, Marcus and Joni had communicated to the whole family that Jonathan would succeed his father as Daystar president. But the email stated that Joni would replace Marcus as president instead. Jonathan said the change was punishment for accusing Pete. On August 17th, Marcus emailed his children and their spouses again, this time to express his distress over the fractures in our family. He also warned them in no uncertain terms to stop playing judge, jury, or executioner, emphasis in original email, and to trust his leadership or face the consequences. Marcus wrote, "There can only be one leader. Either you trust me as God's leader or you don't. Your mother and I built Daystar without you, and we can run it without you. That would break my heart, but there are consequences for actions and attitudes. Don't doubt my resolve. Don't question my determination," emphasis in original email. The email ends with an assignment for his family to make a written list of every hurt every slight and every bad word or deed that has happened to you by a family member. Include your mother or me if it is warranted. Then we can deal with it when Denise Boggs comes. Boggs didn't visit Daystar. Instead, Pete and his wife flew to North Carolina to interview with Leonhardt. A meeting Leonhardt said Boggs had coordinated with Marcus and Joni. Leonhardt said the meeting was arranged so she could provide an assessment of whether the allegations against Pete seemed valid. Assessments, which are often presented in criminal trials or sentencing, normally include thorough clinical interviews with subjects and sometimes psychological tests. However, Leonhardt said she wasn't able to interview Pete. She said Pete's wife insisted on being present for the interview and answered all the questions intended for her husband. As a result, Leonhardt said she told Boggs that Pete would have to return for an interview before she could offer any assessment, but Pete never came back. TRR also obtained a recording between Jonathan and Susie Lamb and Boggs in which Boggs discusses why the process ended before Leonhardt could offer an assessment. Boggs said, "I remember when Marcus and Joni said, 'We want to drop everything, just drop everything, okay?' And so I had told Debbie Leonhardt, they just want to drop everything. I don't want anything more to be written and documented on this." And so that was what Joni had said. This discussion between Jonathan, Susie, and Boggs took place on November 18th, 2023. But before then, Jonathan and Susie said they didn't know what happened during Leonhardt's interview with Pete. They knew only what Marcus and Joni told them. On August 25th, 2021, Jonathan said Marcus summoned him and JW into Marcus's office. Marcus then told them that Leonhardt had investigated the allegations against Pete and determined that Pete had not molested Jonathan and Susie's daughter, Jonathan said. He added that Marcus warned Jonathan and JW that if either of them continued to believe Pete was a pedophile, they'd need to find another job. TRR specifically asked JW in an email to confirm what transpired in the August 25th, 2021 meeting between him, Marcus, and Jonathan. But JW did not respond to the question. Jonathan said that after that meeting, he felt like he had no choice but to submit to Marcus's directive. Just 3 months later, Marcus died unexpectedly, and Jonathan spent the next year sorting through his mother's financial affairs and taking care of her, Susie said. Meanwhile, Susie said she became depressed, just like a zombie operating somehow. Daystar, allegations proven false. In Daystar's statement released to TRR yesterday, the ministry likewise cited a 2021 investigation that allegedly settled the matter. There was an internal investigation about the matter you referenced when it was first raised at a family retreat in 2021, which concluded with no wrongdoing found nor evidence provided that corroborated the allegation. Apologies were offered, and reciprocal forgiveness was extended by all involved. Everyone, including Susie and Jonathan, believed that the matter had been appropriately addressed and settled. It is unfortunate that these private family matters have just now resurfaced as these allegations were proven false, and the matter was resolved more than 3 years ago, after which family functions, including holiday gatherings, continued for several more years. Pete's lawyer also claimed in his letter that his client had volunteered to sit for a clinical polygraph examination. He was found to be truthful in the polygraph examination, wherein he denied and refuted these baseless claims. The letter adds that Jonathan and Susie do not truly believe these accusations. If they did, one has to wonder why they continued to travel with their children and Pete and his family. When asked about the polygraph, Jonathan wrote in a statement to TRR that Joni Lamb's new husband, sex therapist, and Daystar host Doug Weiss owns a polygraph company. Jonathan said, "Given Weiss' extensive knowledge of polygraphs, I believe these findings can be easily manipulated." A polygraph company linked at Weiss's counseling webpage is honest to Pete Polygraph. The company states on its FAQ page that it does not conduct polygraphs centered on S offenses. Also, according to lawinfo.com, lie detector tests have questionable reliability and are generally not admissible as evidence in court. TRR specifically asked Daystar if Doug Weiss had administered the test and requested documentation of the findings, but Daystar did not respond to our request. Jonathan also addressed the assertion by Daystar and Pete's lawyer that Jonathan and Susie's family continued to spend time with Pete. Jonathan said, "Ever since the executive retreat on August 3rd, 2021, Susie and I have had a strict boundary to keep Pete and his wife from ever being alone with our daughter, nor has he stepped foot into our home." Jonathan said his family took one beach vacation in June 2022 because Joni was adamant that we go as a family for her sake since she was a new widow. Susie added that she felt sorry for Joni and agreed to go, stipulating that the children would sleep in the basement near her and Jonathan. Jonathan and Susie noted that Rebecca and JW did not go on the family vacation, and Pete is not allowed in their house. Jonathan also noted that in 2022, both he and Susie still believed that Debbie Leonhardt had cleared Pete. In 2023, when the couple learned otherwise, they took their daughter to a counselor who then reported the suspected abuse to Texas Child Protective Services. According to Jonathan and Susie, CPS then reported the suspected abuse to Colleyville Police, who have since reactivated their previous investigation. Police records obtained by TRR show a pending investigation into alleged S abuse involving Jonathan and Susie's daughter. As of time of publishing, no charges have been filed. Daystar also alleges in its statement that this smear campaign is the sad result of Jonathan not being designated as the future president of Daystar following his father's death, something Jonathan emphatically denies. What are your thoughts? Here are my questions. Why is the accused so protected? What did Joni say to that child that caused her to clam up? Why isn't Joni more concerned about who touched her granddaughter? What kind of relationship is in this family that would cause parents to wait so long to report and pursue justice for their child? Let's discuss it in the comments below.